Hello, friends. Welcome to this Adobe Fresco pro tip. My name is Fabiola Lara, and I'm an illustrator and podcaster. And today I'm going to show you how to use the animation panel in Adobe Fresco to animate your illustration work. There's so much you can do. So let's pop over to the animation panel. I have it right over here in Fresco. So now, before you start animating and going in with the animation tool, you should have your files organized. So make sure your layers are condensed. You have things tucked away in folders that you don't want to animate and you don't want to touch. Otherwise, it'll be a bit disorienting. Now, there's two things that we're going to go over today. So the first one is in the animation panel. I'm going to just show you where it is in case you missed that. It's right here at the right in the bottom, right above that ruler. You're going to hit that panel and you get this new UI here popping up at the bottom. This is the animation panel. So the layer that I have selected already has animations because I wanted to, share it with you. But if you have a brand new layer or a layer that you have just like, let's draw something on there, a circle. Now all you have is that first circle. That'll be that that layer will be your first frame once you open the animation panel. And you can start animating frame by frame by just adding other frames if you click that plus button on the bottom. If you just draw something else, it may be on a separate layer and it's not going to touch the one that you want it to be on. So just be mindful of that. Okay. Now I'm going to delete that circle. That was just an example, and along with it, the animations get deleted. So there's two different types of animations that you can do here in the animation panel. The first one is the frame by frame. So here you can see that I am on the stars layer. I actually have it labeled there, stars. So these stars that pop up, if I have it visible, there we go. These stars here are, I'm going to circle them. These ones right here are what are animating in this one. And you can see that in the layers, I have nothing. And then suddenly they start showing up. And that's what I animated frame by frame just by transforming the size. And the original drawing was just these stars at this bigger size. And then as I added frames, I just shrunk them down. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. The other way that you can animate, aside from this frame by frame, is using paths. So it's similar in the sense that the animation that you create takes this same approach, but you end up adding more movement by using paths. So I'm going to actually boost this layer opacity. So here I have, if you're looking here at this little bubble here, it's a puff of smoke, and you can see that the first frame is just this tiny puff, and it grows. Boop, boop. Okay, so I have 4 frames. But the cool thing with the animation panel is that you can actually add a path to it so that it moves all around. So if I actually play this, I have a ton animating, and this looks really chaotic because I just boosted the opacity, but you're able to then play with those layer properties to create different effects. Okay, so let me show you exactly how I pulled this off, so it's less of a mystery here. The first one, I'm gonna go back to the frame by frame. So I'm gonna get out of this. And let's see, something that I think every illustrator is curious to animate would be something like text. So let me go over. I have this text. I have it all in one grouped up into one folder. But something that is really simple is to just redraw the text so that it looks like it has movement, right? So if I play you this entire animation, just so you can see it, oops, let me go back and turn this layer opacity down again further, because that's just a background effect that I have. You can see that I have a lot going on, and this is all within these motion layers. But I want to now add the motion to the text. So what I'm going to do here, which is this layer, I was just double checking, I only have that first frame. That group becomes that first frame. Now I'm going to add another frame. Boop, boop, boop. I'm going to add another frame. I guess I'll just redraw. Why isn't it moving? Let me duplicate it. I might have to just merge it. There we go. Now I should be able to. Okay. So when we're in here, I always, before I animate, I group it so that I have it all together. But then when I go to animate, you do have to merge it. So I kind of keep that original group in case I want to go back to it at some point. What if I don't like the animation that I made? So now I'm going to go back to my pencil, which is this one. And I have this first frame is it in full opacity. I'm going to add another one and now I'm restarting, but now I don't see it and I want to be able to draw right over it. In order to do that, you got to go to settings and enable onion skin. Now you can kind of see it. I'm going to zoom in to make sure you guys are seeing what I'm seeing, but there's this gray where my text was underneath. I'm going to boost that opacity so I can see it a little bit better, especially for this demo. And now I'm going to redraw it in that same color because I want it to have some movement. Now, the thing with this is that you want to redraw it, but you don't need it to be the exact same because if you draw it the exact same, it's not going to have that movement that you want. So I'm going to quickly redraw it and not care too much about how exact I'm getting to it. Now, if you draw it too different, it'll be a little bit too jumpy. So you got to keep that in mind. Now I'm going as quickly as I can for our demo purpose. Oops. Oh no, I tapped out of it. Boop. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. That can happen. You have to be careful. But this is the real way that I would do this. Okay. So now I'm almost done here. And this is something that I like to show because a lot of illustrators, if they have words, you kind of want them to also have movement, not just the illustration. So this is how I would do it. Now, I have the same amount of frames in every single one of these motion layers. That way I can time everything out and everything is following that same timeline. If you start off with 12 frames, you kind of want to keep 12 frames throughout your whole thing or in the same like by the same multiple. So if you can have 6 and 8, it could work with the rhythm, but if you have an odd and an even, it might get thrown off. So just something to keep in mind. But if you're just getting started, try and keep the frames per second the same for every single motion layer. But let me turn off the onion skin so we can see what we just did. So that's what I just wrote. And then I'm going to hit play. This is kind of what happens. I want you to just pay attention to the text because I have those previously animated versions. Now, that kind of works, but I don't love the speed. I would, in theory, add one more, and you can then play with if you wanted to boomerang or play once. I'm going to, for the sake of our example, delete that. Actually, undo. We're going to do it one more time so we can finish this example. I'm going to add one more frame, enable onion skin, and I'm going to do it one more time so you can see exactly how it would work if you did it 3 times. 3 times is kind of the key when you want to create subtle animation on text, or even you could do the same effect on one of the elements that you drew, and it would create this kind of back and forth little movement that I think is kind of a really good starting point. Okay, we're almost there. Destroys. And this graphic is one that I made for my podcast, Draws in Spanish, where I talk to Latin American artists about their creative career. So this is actually a kind of tidbit from one of my conversations about how overthinking can really dampen your creativity. Okay, or destroys is more powerful. Okay, so now we're going to hit play all. Now you can see how overthinking destroys creativity is moving. I have to play with the opacity here, as I think when I originally created the text, I duplicated a lot. But this is how it would look like. And then I can change here. It's not going to matter if you do loop or boomerang because you have 3 frames, but I'll show you how that can affect your playback as well. If I hit play once, it will only loop it once. It'll do frame 1, 2, 3, and then stop while the rest of the animation continues. So I don't want to actually do that. Let's do loop and hit play all. So that's it on loop. So this is one quick way to add very simple movement. This would be like beginner, but then you can use that same technique with the animation panel to go really hard. So the second version of this that I think is more robust for all my pro tip seekers would be this one here where I have, it looks crazy because I have onion skin on. I have these flames. So this is the same thing. I drew every single frame that I wanted this flame to kind of combust into. So it starts here with the small flame. Flame and frame are really close together. Okay, flame, tiny flame, bigger, bigger, and then here it maxes. That's the biggest. So for this one, for these ones, I actually drew them on separate layers and pasted them in here because sometimes when you're working in the animation panel, it's hard to see what you're doing. So that's a little pro tip. You can always copy and paste a frame from the layers here to down here. Okay. And here we can really see the difference on that playback. So if I were to say I have it on loop, so you can see how it just goes from 6 back to 1. But that kind of looks weird, right? Because the flame isn't like shrinking or growing. So I'm actually going to go to settings and hit boomerang. The difference here you're going to see is that it goes from 1 to 6 and then 6 to 1. It goes through all those frames instead of just jumping back to the beginning. Doesn't that feel so much better? It feels like an actual loop. Even though the other one's called loop, it loops in the frames instead of boomeranging through it. Now, another option that you have here is, again, you have the play once. And if, let's say I want to speed it up, I'm like, oh, that is so slow. You can start playing with the frames per second that I mentioned. Again, this can be tricky because once you start playing with them, it can affect all your other ones. So I would do this towards the end. But here we go. Now I super sped it up, and it also affected the other motion layers because it kind of impacts the motion settings for all of them. And there it is a bit slower. I can even slow it down more. But then I think that's too slow. So I like the rhythm of 8. It worked with the way that I animated it. And the reason I added these empty frames here is because with the 8 that I wanted to keep in multiples, in the same multiples for all of the motion frames, you needed that little bit of space. Okay. And okay, another thing I want to show you is these little puffs that I showed you earlier, which are down here. Boop, boop, boop. Right down here, we have the smoke. So this is really cool. And you can already see that the animation panel looks totally different when we're talking about the paths. We have this paths bar that pops up at the top. So I'm going to once again increase that layer opacity. And I'm actually going to recreate it because I think it's going to be way easier to follow if I just do it from the beginning. So we're going to create a new layer over on the layer side over here. And I'm going to do a little star so that I can show you guys how I would do this. So this is how I draw my stars. There's a lot of ways to draw stars. So let's not get too caught up there. Okay, onion settings. Okay, now I can see it. And now I want my stars to kind of burst. So there we have the ones with the line. And then I'm going to do one more with a little dot. So now if I play this, it kind of looks like that. That works. But I want to maybe increase the frames here so it goes on a different speed. Let's see. Boop, boop, boop. Here we go. Yes, I like that. That looks like the right speed for this. And I'm going to have it loop, maybe. Let's see what happens on loop. Yes, I like it how it looks on loop. So you play with those settings with your animation. So now I've created this one little star, and that works. That's very cute. But I want the stars to be all over this, right? I want it to like kind of go all around this and there be multiple stars. You might think I got to draw this star over and over and over again in all these different settings, but you don't because Adobe Fresco is so smart. So if you go to settings, not settings, if you hit this path button, now you can suddenly just draw where you want it to go. So I'm going to say that I want it to go from right to left. And now this star is following that path. Do you see how it's crossing? Let me redraw this so that we can choose maybe a path where it's a little bit more easy to see. Let's do that. Okay, it's like kind of going behind the head, So I'm going to just play with this. So now we have all these layer properties that show up on the right. I'm going to add not just one star, I want multiple stars. Okay, we have a ton of stars now happening. I want them to be scattered so they're not all following the same line. Okay, that's working. I want them to grow and shrink so that they kind of follow that path, but also grow and shrink. And I can adjust how much I want them to grow and shrink. So are you seeing there? They're tiny and then they get really big. Ooh, I'm kind of into that. And the number of times that I want them to grow and shrink. I'm going to say 6 times feels like the right way. And I can even adjust how much I want them to sway. So if I sway them like that, that looks a little bit crazy. I'm going to lower it. And I'm going to lower the multiples, I think. Okay, and you can do easy in, easy out just to smoothen out that animation or change how you want that speed to be. I'm going to leave it on uniform. Another one that's really important is this align to path, because you can have that little animation that you do align to that path as opposed to kind of being offset. And you can also randomize the frames. In this case, I don't super want to randomize the frames because I made them on a certain way on purpose. But now I have just this one path. You don't have to duplicate this motion layer. You can actually add a whole second path that doesn't follow the exact thing, and it will work. Now, when you do this, if you do it too different, you're going to want different settings. So I don't recommend doing that. I just wanted to show you what would happen. But you can have a second path that's similar. That one's kind of similar. And it will mimic that same motion, which is so easy and fun. So now I've added these little stars everywhere, but let me lower the multiple. Oops. Okay, I'm going to do 4. Does that feel right? I've decided I don't want those paths there. I'm going to do, oops, maybe them going like this so they look more a part of the background. And I'm going to add multiples here because now this path is way bigger. Let's do like 10. I'm going to unselect the align to path. Okay, I kind of like that. Let me add more multiples. Scatter them less because I think that's what's making them a little too chaotic for my taste. So here you just end up playing with how you want those to act. I feel like they're getting hung up here on the bottom right. So I'm going to redo this path once again. Maybe start it from further out. Let's do it like that. There we go. Because they start from that starting point, and I think with the easy in and the grow shrink, they were getting caught up in there. Yes, there we go. So that can be another way to just adjust it. And I'm going to hit align to path and see what that looks like. When they align to path, they go with the rhythm of the path. So with the direction of the path, and I don't really want it to follow that direction. So I'm going to undo that. Have it sway maybe just a touch. So here's how you can play with that to add even more motion. And you can also change the blend mode. So sometimes for these backgrounds animations, I don't want them to be so eye-catching. I want it just to have the movement happening in the background, but I don't need it to be the center focus. So you can hit these other blending modes like you would with any other layer and kind of have it be more subtle. So I kind of like the linear burn, maybe the screen. Let's see, let's play here. This is what I always do when I animate something and then I want to just double check like, oh, maybe that's looking a little crazy. Now I have these background little stars that are setting a vibe without having to be in the forefront. So sometimes that's something you should consider when you're animating is, do I want this animation to be primary, secondary, just decorative? And you can have these blending modes help you out. Let's see. I can't seem to decide. Let's go with linear light, but lowering it. And I think it's going a little too fast for me. So I'm going to lower maybe the frames. When I play with so many things, there comes a point where you're like, wait, which one is the one that controls that? Okay, here we go. Say I only wanted to go 3 times, 2 times maybe. Okay. And yes. So you can adjust, just play with these properties until you get it just right. But the original one that I had, you can see this one only has 3 different frames, but you can add as many frames as you'd like to get the animation as complex as you'd like. Another thing that I want to show you here is how I did these laser beams coming out of the eyes. So this one's kind of interesting. I'm going to turn off onion skinning so you can see it. Because instead of having every single part of that laser animated, I only really animated the beginning and then all the way to the end. This is something you should think about when you're animating, because sometimes you just want to mimic movement. You don't actually have to show the entire movement. So here, this is the end of the animation. And here are all the steps I'm going to show you. I could have added more animations kind of in between frame 3 and frame 4. But if you add more frames, it's going to feel slower. And you have to remember that we're kind of mimicking human perception, essentially. It's the same way that you don't need to draw all the details of a background scene because you're just giving the illusion of it, right? So for this one, I drew my favorite way to start these. I'm going to get rid of the motion panel for a second, is to actually draw the final layer. So I'm going to hide it and just recreate it very quickly for you with this bright green. I like to draw the final version. So we're going to say it's like this. Boop. Laser eyes. Let's get a thicker brush here. I'm trying not to be a perfectionist while also being a perfectionist. I got to redo that. Okay. So we snapped it. Okay, here's the final laser. Now I'll hit motion graphics. That becomes my first frame. Now I just kind of duplicate that layer. Don't do it that way. Here we go. There we go. Sometimes there's multiple ways to do things and it can feel confusing, but if you click on that first layer, you can duplicate that frame. And then in that frame, I erase from it. So I want maybe just to turn on onion skinning so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, did I turn it on? Yes, okay. Or what happened? I've clicked too many things. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to just erase from that. I'm actually going to erase just right here. Erase. Deselect. And now let's see. Perfect. So now we have the full frame, less, and now I'm going to duplicate this one. Oops. I hit undo on accident. Duplicate that frame. And then I'm going to move it all the way to the beginning because I want that to seem like a flash. Okay, so now we have this. And I'm going to duplicate one more and maybe just do like right there. I want to remove that little chunk. Erase. Now, if we play this through, whoops, deselect. If we play this through, it's backwards. No problem. You just want to rearrange the order. So you want, and this can be a little tricky, so to keep, I want 3 to move forward, and I want 4 to actually be the first one. So let's see it. There we go. Now we've moved it. Perfect. And you see, if you actually animate, if you skip some frames, it's going to seem faster, even though it's really not. You're just doing that illusion. You can loop it or you can boomerang it. So I kind of like boomerang. The concept of the laser going back is kind of cool because then it'll like turn off, and that's what you're going for. Now, you can also just do so many different things here. You can show these paths as frames if you wanted, if this had a path on it, so you could edit it even further. So here's how you just adjust it. And if I just wanted it to play once and I wanted that final illustration to just show everything at the end, I could freeze everything by saying play only once. So these are just some of the tips and tricks I like to use when I'm animating in Fresco. And I think a big part of it is just starting slow, starting with small animations and then adding them as you go. So you don't have to have every single thing animated. I just kind of start with one and then slowly start picking what else I want to be a part of the illustrations animation. So this is the little smokes that I had made, and they're very chaotic. But again, the theme of this piece is chaos because it's, overthinking destroys. So that's another thing, right? Like depending on what vibe you're going for, that's going to impact the speed of your animation, how many frames you decide to put on, and everything. Now, everyone, if you have any questions about animating, I just showed you how I put everything together for this piece. I think I've accidentally frozen a bunch of other layers. Come on over to our Discord. I'll be answering a ton more questions. So if you have questions, bring them on over. And thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye. See you over on the after party.